Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
All right, Jack, what are we going to do today?
All right, so we're going to do a recap from the past 50 podcast episodes to wrap up 2018. Jeremy and I have individually handpicked a couple episodes that stand out to us as some of the good stuff from the cast. And we're going to talk about it today, sort of a highlights episode.
Yeah, it's not an actual recap of the 50 last episodes, but it's more like editor pick of the 3 best episodes that we have.
Let me kick things off because I think I picked a few more than you may have.
Just a side note, I believe we haven't shared what episodes we selected together, so we're going to do that live. That's going to be interesting. But my guess is, Jack, that we didn't take any tear down per se or any rapid fire per se, right? So
That's right.
just to let you know, it's not that they're not interesting, but it's easier when we do a recap to figure out like one particular topic that we really thought was really well covered or very interesting or worth re-listening, basically.
On my end, when I picked out the couple episodes here, I was thinking that when I go to set up a campaign, there's a few ideas, big concepts that if they were written down in a book, I'd probably have that book somewhere on my desk so I could refer to it as I'm putting things together. These are a couple episodes that I would like to mentally have available so I could draw from them while I'm creating cold email campaigns.
Love it. I'm not going to choose also some of the 73 and 74 episodes where I basically just talk what I do to actually start a new business. So just bear in mind, they're still worth checking out, but they probably won't make it to the final selections.
Maybe. Let's find out what my picks are. Oh, man, surprises coming your way. All right, I'm going to kick things off, Jeremy.
All right.
All right, number 1, I'm working backwards here. I put the episode on GDPR, the uncomfortable truth behind Europe's new regulation. Now,
What episode is it?
this is episode 45, if you want to take a look back at it. But here's a small sort of comment or cliff notes I have from this episode. When we were recording it, you and I were in Europe together. GDPR was very much a hot topic. And now we're sort of reflecting. It's January. We've got some time behind us so we can see what the hell happened. And I remember when we recorded this episode, Jeremy, I was pretty freaked out about GDPR.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to get a letter in the mail that says you now owe 20 million euros to the Department of Commercial Affairs in London. And when GDPR was rolling out or getting ready to, there was, some pretty serious talk about if you send a cold email, you getting thrown in jail or in the Poe house. And you know what? After we recorded this, I know we talked about some of the loopholes and the flaws that GDPR has, and especially that it came down heavy on smaller companies when I think it was put in place to stop some of the large firms from just mass emailing people who don't want to hear from them. So long story short, I'm taking this episode 45 as just a nice reminder that even though a major legislation change can come in the future, it doesn't mean that game's over. You can still acquire customers even through traditional cold emailing. Yes, things have changed, but for the most part, the cold email community is still thriving and going strong.
That's right. And, typical disclaimer, Jack is not a lawyer.
I don't think so, yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things that GDPR really changed is people need to have a process to justify the reason why they're reaching out to other businesses. I think you could probably get away with that. But again, typical disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer either, so do it at your own risk.
But Jeremy, final thing before we move on, I feel like if anybody's got a pulse on how the cold email has reacted to GDPR, it'd probably be you, since you're running QuickMail.
Sure. And like I was keeping on saying to most people asking me, it really seemed like actually it is like business as usual. I mean, I didn't see much change, honestly, at all. So,
phew, what a relief. Okay.
Well, it means like none of my users are spamming. That's all it means, right?
Yeah, I mean, something. It means something. Read between the lines. Jeremy, why don't you kick off things with one of your picks?
I'll change the order a little bit. So Jack is doing chronological. I'm actually doing it the one that had the most impact on myself, like a selfish bastard. But I will say for me, this is episode 79, how to track success with cold email. And the reason for it is because this was mostly something that was a bit blurred to me as to how do you really handle a reply and how do you actually set that reply to be positive or negative. And this episode actually brought a lot of clarity to me as to what is really a positive reply, what is a negative one, and what's a potential neutral. And that was super helpful.
So how are you judging a successful campaign today?
Pretty much what we said in the episode, which is basically as soon as you got open the conversation, then it's a positive. And for me, that removed a lot of the fuzzy, blurred, gray area kind of thing that was a bit uncomfortable with that. So that's really great. That really helped me out.
Yeah, it's nice to have clarity on if you're winning or losing and finding out. I remember we talked about using those stats to get real-time information. You know, how are you doing today as opposed to waiting weeks or months until a deal comes through?
We mentioned in that cast that the ultimate metrics is obviously how much money you're making, but with long sales cycles, you can only know that, in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, but yet you still need to iterate with different variations on a weekly basis. So you need a different indicator. And obviously, positive reply rate is a really good indicator. But what does positive mean was really where the gray area was.
My next one, Jeremy, I got episode 72 here. This is the episode, it's called Test This, 9 Simple Cold Email A/B Test Ideas. When it comes to creating a cold email campaign from scratch, there's few things more helpful than having like sort of bullet point notes on different A/B tests you can set up. And this episode, I appreciated how we sort of just forgot theory for a moment and just went straight to 1 through 9. Here's ideas that you can use to lift some reply rates. And a couple of the A/B tests that I particularly liked, I've got these asterisks on the list here. Playing with a custom intro sentence seems to be pretty effective. Call to action, that's like a really easy way that you can sort of get more replies in, just depending how much you're asking of your prospects. And finally, trying out a new email address if you're struggling with anything related to deliverability. That's a kind of a simple, easy to do test. But a lot of times, if there's any deliverability issues on the email you're using, a new email address will get rid of those and you'll start getting the replies that you thought you should be. That's just boom, it can make a big difference.
Yeah, one thing I really loved in this episode is the emphasis on actually not tiny micro testing kind of thing, like on the Word and stuff like that, but really going super wild to your experiment, taking like a complete different approach and then seeing if this one works better. And I think that's usually where you get the best breakthroughs and stuff. And one thing we didn't mention in this episode, we mentioned it in the episode 82 about cadence, is also try, testing different time using Fibonacci sequence. Maybe that will work better or not. I don't know.
Last thing, we talked about playing around with the CTAs to, put a good test together.
Yeah, and we got 3 episodes recently about the CTA, so that'd be awesome.
Exactly. So we got episodes on different CTAs you can use, and also probably more handy would be this free download. You go to quickmail.io/goodies, and there's this free CTA swipe file. Grab it and use, I think there's over 100 CTAs you can use for testing purposes. So a lot of good stuff there.
The next one I'm going to choose is something about prospecting. And it's episode 76, The Secret to Never Running Out of Prospects. And this is something super common, that we have our list, we have our directory, we then need to find a tool, we find a tool, we start emailing, and then the list runs dry, and then we just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So I think this was a super helpful episode to just realize that, hey, there is more than potentially the first pool of prospect that you had. I love some of the tips that you gave about just subscribing to some subscription events, whether it's on Google News or
LinkedIn alerts
or LinkedIn. Yeah, those sort of things, they're absolutely great and can provide you a pool of prospects that is keeping on coming.
Right.
That was super useful for me. It's a bit like if you don't find more leads, it's due to lack of resourcefulness, not to lack of resource.
Yeah. And in an extreme case, I don't know if we talked about this on the episode, but I've encountered companies who have been up and running for years. They know exactly who they're going after, but they've freshly decided to, I don't know, pivot, so to speak, and go after a new market with the exact same technology. Why? Because maybe they feel like they've already cornered one particular area of the market, but just by turning its focus on a new segment, that's unlocked another 10,000 prospects that should be really excited to hear from them in their campaigns. So there's so many ways you can go about finding new prospects. Don't give up. And if you're running into a wall or you're discouraged, take a listen to episode 76. It'll hopefully motivate you to go out there and drum up some more prospects.
That's right. So, since I stole your
Stole my
episode,
thunder.
Yeah, maybe you can find a new one.
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump into episodes 73 and 74. How to launch your startup with cold email. Jeremy, this was kind of you're laughing because this was your spotlight, your sort of solo performance, if there ever was one on the podcast. But I thought it was so damn helpful and just freeing to hear that there's a way that you don't need any funding or even a brilliant idea or an idea at all, that you can just kind of create a business out of thin air.
That's right.
And it sounds too good to be true. And I would usually file this away as like nice to know, but that ain't in reality. But there was a couple things that you pointed out that were just like, kind of wanted to smack myself for not thinking of it before. I'll give a quick recap because it's a phenomenal episode. Guys, if you haven't listened to it, it's 73 and 74. Very much worth a listen here. A couple highlights, takeaways from me. You're starting with a market, not a product. It's a huge shift. It means you don't have to have an idea. Instead, just find a market that you're willing to serve. Asking a bunch of questions intelligently. So there's a difference between asking a vertical question and a horizontal question. You can dive deeper into that on the cast, but for the most part, you want to ask questions that get to the root of what people will pay money for. And vertical questions will help you drill deeper into that. And in the follow-up episode, Jeremy showed us sort of how to rotate from collecting this information to starting to sell. And that's just like almost too good to recap. If you're not familiar with these concepts, check out episode 74, but talked about not giving up on the prospects, talked about starting with the low-hanging fruit, people who have already given you feedback. And eventually, if you're hitting the right pain points, you're going to be making money. You're going to have people try and give you their credit card if you sort of just listen to these tips outlined in these two episodes. So yeah, kudos, Jeremy. That was a great one.
Thanks, appreciate. Actually, today on Facebook, there was someone asking, what would you actually provide as a service if you needed to get money, this week, kind of thing. And you read all the answers, and they are sort of like good in their own, but my approach would have been simply contact people in your network and ask them what they're trying to solve right now, and would they actually pay someone to do it? And then that's it, boom. When I was doing interviews with the market and I understood this difference between asking horizontal questions versus vertical questions, I would have 10 people I interviewed. 8 were ready to give me money on the spot. But
Amazing.
This is the difference between the short term and the long term. You actually could get money very quickly, but if this is one person that has like that specific problem they will solve, they will pay for, then how good is that to scale and do a product out of that? So I really wanted a product. So that's why, getting money is actually easy when you know how, but serving everyone, that is a bit more difficult.
That's great. And if you're listening saying like, wow, this is great for Jeremy because he's a smooth operator, but I could never do that. Luckily, it really is a process. And if you sort of just go down the list, ask the right questions, think about it a specific way that helps you get to these big pain points that people are willing to pay money for, I think you'll experience the same thing that Jeremy just described here. It's amazing stuff.
Was that actually your 2 episodes in one go, or was that another one you still have?
It might as well be. It's such a similar topic, but both of them had to be on my list because they're not replaceable and each one is just got enough goods in there that I wanted to highlight them in this recap
Awesome.
episode. Send us home, Jeremy. What's the last one you got?
All right, the last one, I got two, but I really thought you would say one of them.
Oh, let me hear. Okay.
Actually, I kind of knew that you would select episode 76 about never running out of prospect, just because I saw you briefly opening it in your Google Drive. So I was kind of hoping that I will be able to mention it first. But I honestly thought you would select episode 56 about social proof.
Oh.
And because I know you're pretty big on that one, and it's our most downloaded episode to date, ? Using social proof.
So go ahead. Social proof.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I thought you would take. I wouldn't have taken that. I prefer reciprocity, you know that.
Yeah.
But reciprocity was earlier, so I couldn't pick it up again.
I am a huge fan of social proof, so much that I probably don't need to refer to the episode anymore, which is probably why it didn't make it on my list. Not that I've mastered the art of social proof, but it may not be open on my desk when I'm putting things together, although I'm using the crap out of social proof in cold emails.
Yeah, I mean, your 10,000 comments on your post actually,
yeah, right.
Said it all already, right?
It says enough right there. Any takeaways specifically that you like to draw from this episode, Jeremy?
Nah, I think we can move on.
Okay.
So my final episode is actually episode 83. I know it's a very recent one, but I really liked it. How to put off a hard sale with cold email. And the reason for it is because when we talked about this episode, you kind of like took me almost by surprise. And I actually did like, the approach to my surprise. So I think it's good to be humbled sometimes. And I think that was one episode that actually humbled me, that you never really know what will be working. It's about describing all your offer and really hitting or aiming for just one transactional type of email, like a sort of like sales letter. And, traditionally, we've always said that's not going to work. This is not the right approach. You're going to be flagged as spam. Spam filter are going to, put you in junks and stuff like that. But there are some places where it makes more sense. And as we discussed with Jack, actually produce better results for some cases. I guess the trick is if you're novice, don't start with that.
Oh, definitely not, right.
But as you're becoming more experienced, and if you couple that with some A/B testing, I think it's still worth giving it a shot to some extent without being too crude about like, you want to buy it, kind of question mark.
If the only takeaway, Jeremy, is like you said, just sort of being humbled and realize that you need to stay open to ideas that you would previously have discarded because it sounds ridiculous. I'm always finding out stuff that I never thought would work. Like, I once sent a bump email with nothing in it, and it outperformed the bump email I was using. So, it's just like, I almost hesitate to even think that I know half what I'm doing here because there's a lot to be learned.
And, cold email is a little bit like your kids growing. You think you figured out a way of handling them, but they always outsmart you. And the same with the market. You think you figured out something, and then, somehow something else is coming up. And
that's right.
So you never stop learning, really.
Good takeaways, not just deciding to run a more of a hard sell test, but also just keeping that student mentality with you, the beginner's mind. And
that's right.
Yeah, good stuff. That one probably should have been on my list, but I'm glad you brought it up.
There you go.
Cool.
All right, Jack. Anything else?
I'm just looking forward to the next 50 episodes here, hoping we have another great recap in about a year from now.
That's right. All right, Jack.
Okay, Jeremy. See ya.
Bye.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high five by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
So they can send awesome emails.
And make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.